Welcome to the Lost Vet podcast, where we are helping you to get back to your passion and purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Melodie Chan, and in today's part 2 episode with Rob Marr, we continue our conversation on what I thought we were going to be focusing on, specifically of firing clients, but instead it has evolved into a conversation on, still related, a conversation on defining what a good customer looks like. So join me as we keep going in part 2 in providing some structure to this idea.
I want to come back to the firing the client piece, because I think if we think about that conversation and kind of taking a loan run up, taking your 12 months, figuring this out, let's start from what the challenge really is, okay? Which I believe is not really knowing what a good client looks like. And I think, we talk about bad clients. Well, then what's a good client? And I think emotionally we know what a good client is. But I think what is really helpful in this situation is to catalog it. So to be very, very clear, like an avatar nearly, or some criteria, what constitutes a good client? Is it loyalty? Is it friendliness? Is it adherence to your advice? I was actually having a very interesting conversation about adherence just the other day with Jules Benson, actually. So thank you, Jules. But he sent me on a really interesting article about how vets can influence the administration of the medication with the patients, right? So all of these different elements, like if you've got a customer that actually will follow the protocols that you give them, follow the advice, that's a great customer, because then the animal is going to get better quicker if it follows the advice being given by the vet, for example. So there's lots of elements. Could be about the price that person is prepared to pay, could be about their geographic location, could be about are they just friendly or easy to deal with? I mean, there's all kinds of different ways you can think about an ideal customer. But I would encourage you, first step is to talk to your team and brainstorm that out so you have a clear idea about what good looks like. Mm-hmm. Because then if you don't know what good looks like, then it's very hard to contrast bad. Okay, so where does that logic take us? So we know what a good customer looks like. The simple place to start is with our old friend, the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule teaches us that we get 80% of our results, 20% of our efforts, and 80% of our efforts give us 20% of our results. So what does that mean in a veterinary practice? It means probably if you have 10 customers, 2 of them are responsible for 80% of your revenues or profit. And then 8 of them on a sliding scale are responsible for the rest. But what it also means is that 20% of your customers, your bottom 20%, your bottom 2 in that 10 are probably taking up 80% of your time because they're frustrated about price, they're never happy, always complaining, they're difficult to deal with, they don't follow your advice, then they complain that the advice didn't work, blah, blah, blah. So just as much as your top customers can have a disproportionate effect in a positive way on your business, your bottom customers can have a disproportionate effect in a negative way, right? So what we need to understand is that every business needs to have some kind of bleed away, some kind of drift off of that bottom 20%. So rather than it being something as aggressive as firing a customer, like we talked about, this is more like a transition away from customers which don't really appreciate or value what you're providing for. Okay, it's more of a transition away. It's more of a journey. So the way I always think about customer management or firing customers, keeping customers, investing in customers, you obviously want to invest more in that top 20% because they're going to give you disproportionately high return. And the sad thing is without this focus, we often can treat our best customers the worst because we're too busy dealing with our worst customers who take up all of our time. So we end up in this kind of vicious cycle. So let's be clear on a couple of things. The 80-20 rule actually doesn't teach us anything useful. Okay, and I know I sound like I'm contradicting myself, but what the 80-20 rule does is it tells us what we already know. And the way I position that is the 80-20 rule tells you what happens in a reactive passive business, i.e. all customers are good customers. Everyone here is who we've got. In that situation, you end up with the 80-20 rule. So what the 80-20 is an observation of truth. It's an observation of fact. It's an observation about saying this is how typically groups of customers are made up. This is an observation about the way that energy gets reward in life in general. And you can apply the 80-20 across the spectrum. So what we actually need to do is we need to use the 80-20 to make better decisions about how we manage our customer base. And even that idea, I know for many of you, will be something you don't consider. Like, what do you mean manage my customer base? So, I mean, like, what level of proactive level of service are you going to provide in order to either encourage and deepen those relationships with those top customers? And then what level of service should be provided for people which are actually detrimental or negative in terms of the morale or the profitability of your business? So this is not something you just like go off and fire all your worst customers in one big through. It's more like providing a relevant and appropriate level of service to the people that should be receiving it, whilst providing an appropriate level of service to people that should be receiving it at the other end. So that could be on a spectrum that your top clients get, if they ring, they get that day. And if there's a lower down that echelon client, they get bumped to the following day because you've got to make space for the people that you're working with, that are working with you as well. So what you can do in a very simple way is use like an Excel spreadsheet, and then you brainstorm with your team these criteria, like across the, and literally on columns B, C, D, E, however many you've got, you put the criteria at the top of the sheet of paper, and then you just have a list of the customers down the side, chunk it out, like do maybe 20 at a time. You know, this could be something you do on a regular basis throughout your staff meetings, for example. So you have your customers down the side, you've got your criteria across the top, and then just simply score them out of, I usually suggest 5, in terms of how well they match that criteria. So it could be pays their bills on time, and maybe they don't. So that's a 2 or a 1. Okay. The reason I say 5 and not 10 is that no one knows the difference between a 2 and a 3. A 3 and a 4 and a 7 and an 8. Right. So it's whereas 5, everyone gets it, right? 5 is excellent, 4 is good, 3 is average, 2 is poor, 1 is a disaster. So everyone, that's an easy metric. So just score each customer against the criteria. Okay. Now, I would say, just for having done this exercise multiple times, the fastest way to do the exercise is to do that on the vertical, not the horizontal. It's just much quicker to score each client against a criteria than to score each client against all the criteria. It's kind of like that mental shift from criteria to criteria. It takes ages. Whereas once we get into do these guys pay on time? It's a do. Like, it's like literally 10 minutes versus an hour. So there's no comparison. So definitely score on the vertical. And then what you'll be left with is these total scores. You'll have natural groupings. So let's say there's 10 criteria and you've done your assessment. You'll have some that score 40 plus, so they're your top customers. You'll have some that score like 25 to 40. They could be improved. There are some elements of the relationship that could be a little bit better, but they're in the ballpark. And then you've got everyone from 24 down, who might be less important to the business's profitability. So now you've got, like, in effect, a bronze, silver, gold kind of an understanding about who's adding value, where we can provide in a proactive way. Remember, we talked about the 80-20 rule being a reactive thing. In a proactive way, we can determine a level of service that we can provide to our best customers in terms of the relationship we have with them, to continue to add and deepen value that's being provided, whilst providing a relevant level of service to the people at the other end of that spectrum. It's not about firing them. It's about saying, hey, Melodie, yes, I'm really sorry, but we don't have anything for 2 weeks for that appointment. Whereas, hey, Rob, no problem. We'll get you in today. So that's what I was saying at the beginning. It's not necessarily about this kind of like ruthless, violent kind of firing of a customer. It's actually a more systematic approach. But the business needs to know what it's looking for. And if you don't know what you're looking for as a business, then how can you attract what you want? Even think about that from a marketing perspective. So it's important that you know what good looks like so you can invest in it and proactively move the business in that direction, and provide an appropriate level of service to people that would receive that well. And then there's a certain percentage of customers that will actually, what's cool about this approach over 12 months is people generally self-select. If they can't get the time they wanted that day in a very demanding way, they'll just go find someone else.
Yeah.
And then you are cleaning house, whilst you're working, you're not having to take a big aggressive axe to a problem, but you're actually just moving the business in the right direction over a period of time.
Yeah. How, as you're talking about that, and I'm thinking about just booking appointments, for example.
Yeah.
So, and I'll put the caveat. I mean, if the animal's in distress and it's an emergency, I think, and they call, then we understand that they will be put in as they can.
Yeah.
Do you suggest for people to leave some open spaces in their schedules? Because I'm just thinking of it in a practical format. Like right now, especially, you'll hear vet clinics talking about, oh my gosh, we are so booked up and we don't have any free space between now and the next 4 weeks.
Mhm.
Is that an appropriate approach? Should we be plugging everything in the day, or do you advise a different approach in allowing for some breathing room in schedules?
I think in the main, I would encourage people to always provide some breathing room, but that's not necessarily just for more appointments. I think just in general, I don't think, and I'm guilty of it too, but it's like not overloading every single day, every single time with the full schedule. I just think that's exhausting in the end. Um, of course, you're right to caveat my advice. Okay, so if there's a medical emergency coming in and you want to be in a position to support that, right? But
Mm-hmm.
also, you can't support everything in reality. Um, so it's about what's going to put the business in the best possible position to be able to A, afford to be able to cancel or move appointments, and B, to be able to handle them in a calm way. So I think would be helpful with the caveat of medical emergencies to set some exception rules. So like what constitutes an emergency? Like what level does a situation need to be at to facilitate cancelling another appointment to make sure we fit that person in? I I would encourage cancelling and moving rather than accommodating. Like I wouldn't try to, if someone's just coming in for a standard visit, I wouldn't be encouraging them to like try and squeeze that in and a medical emergency and leave the other person waiting, because you're likely to disappoint two people.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be more kind of saying, look, because this is a non-medical, we've had an emergency come in, and I would offer some kind of gratuity, some kind of like thank you, or buy them a coffee or a gift voucher, or something small but tangible that they can kind of soften the blow of having to change their plans for that day.
Yeah.
Look, I appreciate it's not always easy just to find time in your schedule to do some of these mundane tasks of just checkups and things like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's always helpful to not be back to back. In
Yeah.
general, it's helpful. Again, I'm not taking my own advice all the time, but I think it's helpful if you can provide those buffers in a day where it's not even about allowing room for emergency. It's just about allowing time for yourself to go for a walk or do your shopping or go to the bank or whatever it might be.
I think where this conversation's interesting is I can feel the reflex, right, of veterinary clinics where it's no, we whoever calls, we need to schedule them in, right? There's
Yeah.
this need, this unspoken need that we need to absolutely accommodate everybody, everything, everywhere, all at once. We must accommodate all things. I think what this conversation is allowing people to maybe start thinking about is taking that breath and planning, and again thinking about where do we want to be rather than reacting to the phone that is ringing constantly or the appointment book being set up
It's,
constantly.
it's a very dominant overload, the phone. If it's ringing, there's always a sense of like immediacy. And I think then nothing gets treated with any variance. It's always like everything is the same level. Like, a regular inquiry, a regular booking is the same as an emergency. It's all like, got to get them booked in, got to fill the spaces. And I think we do need to be able to, people will wait a day, a week, a couple of weeks in a lot of cases if they just believe that's what it takes to get into a particular business. So I think we have to be realistic about what we can achieve within a week. And we do tend to be rather inflammatory about that. I've noticed this with a lot of conversations with vets. It's always well, what if? And it's like, well, of course those things happen. But like we gotta work towards, plan for the rule and then deal with the exception. We can't just like
Mm-hmm.
not do anything because sometimes difficult situations occur. Like that's a very like fatalistic approach to stuff. We know it's more flawed to like not plan for the exception or not plan with the rule. Sorry, does that make sense? I mean, like if we know that emergencies are going to happen, then we need to have the capacity to be able to deal with them. But we also, most of the time, are not dealing with emergencies every single day, every single moment of the day. So we have to plan in a normal way around that whilst expecting something to happen on a consistent basis. So it's
Yeah.
about allowing that breathing space, as you say, to manage both. And if you've got extra slots and there's nothing coming in, then book them in or offer a discount. You know, hey, put it on social media. We've got a couple of spots popped up. Ring a couple of people that had to wait a week and see have they got time today to pop in. I think it's proactively trying to manage these rather than passively just kind of being a victim to whatever is on your door every day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I think about how we started this conversation. It was about how do we react to needing to fire a client or a customer, and where this conversation ended up being was how do we define what a good customer looks like is to me is
Yeah.
the heart of the topic more than anything.
Well, do you know what I wrote down earlier? And maybe this is a good point to finish on. Like, it's actually what we want is the customers to self-select,
Yeah.
right? We want the customers to choose that this is not the place that they want to go for their kind of like type of care that they want, which is price sensitive or whatever it might be, or care sensitive or availability sensitive, whatever their criteria. If we're not providing it for them, then we might just not be the right partner for the care of their animal.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So then we need to set some kind of criteria up that allows them to go, this is not the place for me. Right.
Yeah.
But also the people that we do really value and appreciate, that we can set up some protocols that makes them feel this is exactly where I belong.
Mm-hmm.
So it's proactively pushing our service levels and our focus and our education, our attention towards the people that have a very strong and positive relationship with us, whilst providing a relevant and appropriate option for people that aren't that bothered. And this is a much more transactional relationship. We
Yeah.
can't be gold service for everyone. I do believe that we can't.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not gold service.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I think just that movement towards the tiered approach with clients, and again, it's I think you've put that boundary in of we're not saying you don't service the tier 3 or the transactional one. It's you're
Mm.
providing that relevant level, and I think that's key.
Yeah. We should
Excellent.
probably do a whole episode on what does that firing conversation look like too. I feel like that's an obvious kind of, because that do all this first, I suppose is what I'm saying. Do all this
Yes.
first, but then maybe we should talk about what does that conversation look like if and when you have to do that. Anyway,
Excellent. Good.
thank you.
Good idea for another one. Well, thank you, Rob. Always fun to have you on.
It's great to see you. Thanks, Melody.
So I don't think I ever thought about the 80/20 rule as being almost like a data point or something more passive that is just happening in your business. It's a concept that we hear about constantly. So I really thought this intriguing in thinking about using that 80/20 rule, but thinking about how can you skew it to your benefit, in the sense of how do you make sure you're really looking after that 20% of clients that are really, really valuable to you. And Rob started out by this section. He started out by talking about how do we define the good clients? How do we look at our client list and provide a ranking system? And so using that Excel sheet, providing some of those behaviors and values that are really important to us, providing a number from a scale of 1 to 5 so that we can rank them. And then from there, you can evolve that idea of tiered customer service. And again, we're not saying that you don't service the bottom tier or those that are looking for a more transactional approach. But again, that may be actually what that group just values and wants. And providing them that transactional approach is good for that particular subset. And what it allows you to do is your top tier, your gold tier, however you want to categorize them, you can provide that above and beyond service. You can provide that proactive service that will really enrich their customer experience that hopefully they will also value. So while this conversation started off as this really aggressive, abrupt, how do we fire a client question, is really something that's morphed into, why don't we look at it as how do we help transition clients into the right space in your business, or help them transition out of your business? Because again, there will be a degree of self-selection, because if you aren't meeting the customer's needs, the majority of them will go and find what they need somewhere else. So I found this conversation quite valuable because I think it again illustrates, if you take that time to plan, if you take that time to discuss what is important to your business, what is important to your team members, you can actually go in this journey and you will have clear-cut definitions. You will have that team charter, that customer charter, where you know what behaviors you're looking for. You will know what you want to provide as far as service and what you feel your clients also value. And from there, you can build that excellent customer service and excellent customer experience. So hopefully this gave you some ideas on how to navigate challenging clients and gives you time to give you permission to pause and reflect and work with your team and spend that next year. Like Rob says, we have a 1-year grace period. Spend that next year in building this up, and you will be surprised, I think, in finding how this friction, if there is some friction now with some customers, some of the customer base, in that clarity in how you can provide that service. So thanks for listening. Until next time.